Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the RacePlazaMedia podcast. My name is Milan.
My name is Pia.
And so if you're on Spotify, you're getting back-to-back episodes because we just did a special episode for Le Mans. We ended up talking a lot more than I thought.
Yes.
But of course, it's 24 hours, so there is a lot to talk about.
100% makes
But
sense.
today, we're going to talk about all the racing that happened in Canada this past weekend. So we had Formula One racing in Canada, as well as F1 Academy. So going into the race, I was already annoyed that the FIA scheduled Le Mans and F1 on the same weekend.
And F1 Academy.
Yeah, and then F1 Academy also ended up getting an extra race this weekend. So it's just a lot of racing to watch in general, which like last year we didn't have that. So this is like avoidable in my opinion, because it's the same racing organization, or governing body. So figure it out.
We also talked about it because there's so many not only previous F1 drivers on the Le Mans grid, but we also have lots of reserve drivers, current also reserve drivers on the grid.
Yeah.
So I'm like, how difficult. They had a break last weekend. They just could have rescheduled it a little bit. Yeah. Do better, FIA.
Honestly. However, it's now going into the race. We actually ended up watching qualifying during the Le Mans race.
Yeah, we
just had it on.
We had it on this phone. We had the qualifying, and on the big screen we had Le Mans
on. So I guess the big thing that happened really during qualifying was in qualifying session 1. We had Isaac Hadjar impeding Sainz doing his fast lap, which was really annoying because I think this once again fell back onto the team telling Isaac that Sainz is not on a fast lap. Sainz then being impeded. And the crazy thing is after Sainz finished his lap, I think he was like 0.002 off of making it into qualifying.
It's so frustrating. And it's also back-to-back Q1 exits. And it's just
for Sainz, and in this case, it's not his fault.
No.
And Isaac picking ended up, this is a slam dunk 3 grid penalty.
Yeah.
Unnecessary.
Really
unnecessary.
Because also he's been so good in qualifying. Isaac Hadjar.
He's consistently been making it into Q3. Yeah. He again made it into Q3. He qualified actually in 9th position, but he started in 12th after getting the grid penalty, which is just annoying, dude.
Yeah. And then I think the other big thing, just quickly to talk about qualifying, is of course ended up coming in first was Russell. So he had a chance of redemption in Montreal in second place. So joining him on the front row is his frenemy, Max Verstappen.
Which they seem to be good now because I think Max ended up apologizing. They ran into the airport into each other.
Oh, okay.
And then I think George was trying to be quite gracious about it. He was like, I didn't even remember what happened in Barcelona at the time.
George. I don't believe that one bit.
Part of me doesn't believe it, and part of me is also maybe he has this mentality of I'm just going to move on.
Yeah.
I'm just not going to let this, be on top of my mind. But I thought it was quite gracious of him to say that.
Yeah. So the two of them were on the front row. And then we had Piastri qualify in 3rd, Antonelli in 4th, Hamilton 5th, Alonso very happily in 6th. And then very surprisingly, we had Norris all the way in 7th, which was definitely a big surprise. And he had a big race ahead of him to make up points because also, of course, he prior to the race, he was behind Piastri in the overall driver championship, and he wants to make up points to not get too far behind or take the lead in the overall driver championship.
Correct. Then finishing up the top 10, we had in 8th place Charles Leclerc, who first he blamed Isaac Hadjar for his qualifying, but then he ended up actually afterwards he told Isaac, like, I don't blame you. He's still lamenting, saying that it was dirty air. I just think he just had a bad lap.
Yeah.
And then we had in 9th place Alexander Albon, and then in 10th place, inheriting the 10th place and really making it up into the points is in the Alpine Franco Colapinto, which is really good for Alpine because Pierre Gasly was nowhere to be seen.
Yeah.
And he ended up actually starting from the pits together with Liam Lawson.
No. Oh, yes.
Yeah. Then, going into the race, I would say George, honestly, fantastic race for him. No faults.
No.
He had a fantastic start, which was really important because you had to essentially make sure that you stay ahead of Max because otherwise I think overtaking would have been difficult again. But George, fantastic start. Max did hound him down for like the first 5 laps, but he wasn't really able to do anything.
Correct.
And then also really big start was by Kimi Antonelli. He ended up was actually able to overtake Oscar Piastri.
Yes.
Sneak up into 3rd place, and then also just hung out in 3rd place for the rest of the race. And, a little spoiler right here, but Kimi ended up scoring his first podium in his 10th race in Formula One.
Incredible.
He made it onto the podium, the 3rd youngest driver ever to make it onto the podium. I think the other ones are Max Verstappen as well as Lance Stroll for whatever reason.
Surprisingly, I was like, what?
I was like, what did the half of the field DNF or whatever happened there? It's true though.
But yeah, so Antonelli had a really great start. I think it's also partially, it was just also he was already on the inside, but then he had a good start, and then the inside line is great for the first turn. Or first 2 turns. But yeah, I mean, he took that lead away, or the 3rd place away from Oscar Piastri. And he just rode very calmly.
Yeah.
He was trying at one point to get Verstappen, but then it didn't seem quite either the pace, or maybe it's the tires or the dirty air, whatever it is. But then he did have a lot of trouble coming from the back because Piastri was there. Then a little bit later in the race, we had Lando and Piastri behind him, which for anybody, I would think it could cause some pressure, or nervousness when you see 2 McLarens in your rear view mirrors,
I'm also assuming that Bono probably kept him in the loop and said, hey, this person's catching up on you, because, that is usually communication that you have with your race engineer. But he kept his cool, and he didn't make any mistakes. I don't think anyone would have faulted him if he would have made a mistake, because this is a lot of pressure. As a rookie, as an 18-year-old, to be doing this well is very, very awesome. And I've said it before, Kimi Antonelli is my guy. You guys can see, if you're watching the video on YouTube, I'm in my Mercedes swag. This is technically Lewis Hamilton hat. But I am still supporting Mercedes because of Kimi, because I am a Kimi Antonelli guy.
I think that's fair. I think the one little thing that added to some excitement before the big event that happened in the race were the tires.
Yes.
There was a lot of...
So I think out of the top 13 we said, only 2 of them, it was Lando and it was Charles that started on the hard tire.
Correct,
where everyone else in the top 13 or something like that started on the medium tires.
And then everybody else behind, so 14 through 20 ended up also on the hard.
Yes.
So there's a question how those compounds will fare. It is known to be a high-deg track.
And it was also quite warm, I think.
No, it was not as warm as it was last year, because last year it was like in the 40s, I think it was. This year it was like in the 20s, so it's like it was a cooler track. That's why Russell also said it lends to the Mercedes nicely, because the cooler, quote-unquote cooler tracks work for the car a little bit better. But yeah, so it was a question of like, how well do the mediums do? And pretty early on, like lap 13, a lot of people complain about tire degradation. There was no... Did they say it was no grading? That's why it was even harder. So then we had the first round of pit stops quite early. Max went in first. Then Russell came in shortly after just to cover himself. And then it ended up being a 2 pit stop for most people. We did have, and this is where the whole Ferrari strategy situation comes in, because Leclerc, like you had said, he was on the hards at first, and the hards seemed to be doing pretty well. Lando was on the hards as well. And he was doing really, really well. The times were really good. They were not degrading quite as fast, which makes sense because it is a harder compound. And then Leclerc was talking over the radio with his engineer, and the engineer was like, oh, we'll do plan B. And then Leclerc is like, no, I think it's plan C. And then
plan C was apparently a 1 stop.
Yes. And then the engineer just said, okay. And then everybody, even the commentators, was like, oh, okay, that's nice that they have an easy conversation about it, because we're used to have them arguing a little bit more.
A little bit,
over the radio. And then, surprise, surprise, Leclerc was brought in to do then a 2 pit stop, and he was so upset about it, because also
the Ferrari had no pace. There was nowhere to be seen. They ended up 5th and 6th. I was just annoyed by it.
Well, not only that, but it's also, I think it's really shitty that there was no communications about it. I feel like, not that he was gaslit essentially, but in a way he was like made to believe that they are agreeing with him on strategy C.
Okay, so
and
I
then
didn't take it like that.
Uh-huh.
I took it like that because he didn't say okay, he said copy. So
Uh-huh.
I thought he was like, okay, I'm gonna consider this.
Yes.
But I guess he was like, I don't give a shit what you have to say. Or maybe he was like, okay, I'm looking at it, but it doesn't make sense. I think Ferrari's strategy was way off. Lewis's first pit, they just put him in the fucking traffic.
Yeah.
And then he was stuck there. And then
And
he
he
was
lost so much time.
He lost a lot of time, especially on the new rubber.
Yes.
What a waste. And then by the time, like it was just, like he ended up coming sixth and
When
he started
also-
from fifth. I'm like, bro.
And then also they were talking about so Hamilton went in earlier into the pits. Then he ended up in traffic. And Lando, who started behind Lewis, went after him into the pits. Ended up ahead of him by 7 seconds.
Yeah.
I was like, what kind of strategy is happening or not happening at Ferrari? So it was really frustrating.
It's also frustrating that this is like Ferrari every once in a while. Like I will say also maybe the calls that sometimes the drivers make are the ones that are like the good ones. So last year we had the call. I don't know if Ferrari made it or if Charles specifically made it to do the one stop in Monza that ended up winning the race. Then this year we had with Lewis, who was like, okay, let's put on the wet tires. And then he ended up coming in third during the sprint, I think it was. So it's like sometimes I'm like, what the hell is going on? And the problem is also like this has been a theme with Ferrari, not since Lewis got there, not since last year. This is a theme when Vettel was still in the car, right? Where there are videos, there are clips on there where Vettel essentially is doing the strategy while he's racing. He's like, okay, well, the tire's this, blah, 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 blah. He's doing like calculation.
Yeah.
And it's like, who are these people who are still there being race engineers, right? When there's clearly other people that are more qualified. Because the thing about it is with Max, like, I'm never worried about his race strategy.
No.
I'm never, not once am I ever worried like, oh, this is going to be the wrong call. I think with McLaren last year, we had some times where I'm like, ooh, this was the wrong call.
Yes.
Where it's also like you have a team that is for the first time in many years in the front and they're not able to kind of making the right calls. Also, who's their number one driver and yada, yada, yada. But this year, we don't really have that. They're stepping up to the plate and making decisive decisions. And it's also when you hear the communication between Oscar and his race engineer, and then you see Ferrari drivers in the race engineer. It's like night and day. Or also Lando. It's like, hey Lando, if there's going to be a safety car, would you be interested in the softs? And he's like, yep, I want that.
Yes.
With Oscar, it's like, okay, hey, listen, man, the front is feeling better, but the back is feeling worse than an FP2.
Yeah.
Okay, I remember, and then he obviously has the data from FP2 and can make the decision. And I'm like, this is how it's supposed to look.
Yeah.
Because we're literally saying F1 is the elite of at least single-seater racing, right? If not looked upon by many as the top, right? And this is the bullshit that we've been doing for
years.
Yeah. You know, and it's getting a little frustrating.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I understand. I mean, I'm already frustrated as a fan, so
I'm not even saying fire someone, but I'm like,
no. But I'm also then I can
someone.
only imagine the frustrations
Yeah.
you would feel as a driver, you know, and also there's a little bit of sense of like powerlessness because you have to listen to the team. Or you have to, when they say box, you have to box.
You have to look, because you don't know, maybe something else happened on track, and this will give you a huge benefit. You know, so you have this trust, right?
Yeah.
Because
but there is no trust, not with the Ferrari drivers and their engineers.
And it also doesn't help then that the car is not where it needs to be. I think Lewis said in an interview that the car currently has 2 left feet. And it's like, so you have a car that's not as competitive, because if the Ferrari would be as fast as the McLaren, right, then at least the race pace would be making up some of the bullshit, right? But in this case, you have 2 things that are not where it needs to be.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know, Fred, make some changes, dude.
I know, seriously.
You know, you're a sweetheart. And I like you a lot, but you need to make some movement because this shit is getting fucking tired.
Yes, 100%.
And the Ferrari fans, we've been tired for 10 years.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
10 plus years, you know?
Seriously. And then I think the last very big thing happened just, yes.
Sorry, I wanted to real quick also shout out Nico Hulkenberg
Oh,
for having a
yes.
fantastic start.
Yes.
He was outside of the points, then immediately he was able to, because it was Albon that ended up going off track in his fight with a Colapinto going
Correct.
into
Yes.
the chicane. And Nico, honestly, he saw some nonsense was happening, and then he just waited it out. They slowed each other down, and then boom, he
Yes.
passed 2 people, made it into the points, and he finished in fucking 8th again with a fucking kick
Yes.
that last year wasn't seeing anything. I'm
It's
so happy for him.
It's so impressive. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really exciting to see him in the points.
Yeah.
Also exciting to have Alonso in the points again.
Yeah, I'm very excited.
In 7th. So that's very, very exciting.
Especially because Alonso, like, the car is a bit better. He said that he's understanding the car better,
Yes.
and he's had a few DNFs which were not his fault, really. And once again, I wanted to highlight Kimi again, because Kimi comes from 3 race weekends back to back to back where he didn't finish a race
Yes.
because there was car trouble. And then to come back and finish on the podium, oh, that's so wonderful.
Yes, it is. Sorry, I'm laughing because I remembered Alonso's iconic moment.
Yes.
That needs to be on a t-shirt.
Yes.
So his engineer over the radio was like, oh, you need to be gentle in turn 3 and turn 8 or something like that. And Alonso, with his sass, he is like, we're racing, not testing.
Yeah.
I was like, what a king. And also there was actually no sass. It was just matter of fact. It's like, this is racing, not testing. Like, I'm not gonna no.
Mind your fucking business.
Exactly.
No, not like that, but
yes,
it's like,
but in a way, yes.
it's like,
Like, I know what I'm doing.
Kinda.
Let me race.
Let me race. Yeah.
I'm racing longer than maybe your career.
Honestly, it might be.
Maybe, I don't know.
It might be because he's been racing for 20 plus years now.
Yeah.
In F1, so yeah,
Maybe.
might be.
But okay, so then the last big thing was happening. It was after everybody had done their second pit stop. Suddenly we had Lando Norris behind Oscar Piastri and getting closer. Lando had a really good pace for majority of the race. He unfortunately had started in 7th, so he had a little bit of things or places to make up. But then with
an excellent pit strategy put him ahead of 2 people.
Yes, exactly,
with
and
fresher rubber.
100%. And then within the last 10, 15 laps, he was behind Oscar Piastri, and he was gaining time. He was getting closer and closer. And so there was some, in my mind, I was like, oh, I wonder if they're going to fight. I mean, of course they're going to race it out because they're both in championship contention. There can't really be any team orders. Hopefully they'll keep it clean. It's a tricky track to overtake, I would say. There's some areas it's easier than it can be tricky because there's not a lot of run of areas everywhere. The walls are right there.
I mean, because it is a street track, right?
It is. It's a beautiful track though.
Yeah,
I really like
gorgeous.
it.
Yeah.
But
Montreal,
then,
wow.
Yeah. So then Lando was getting closer and closer. So then Oscar started getting closer to Antonelli because he needed the DRS because Lando was in his DRS. And then it was just like, I think Lando was like 0.4 seconds behind. Then we were going into the hair needle pin, closer towards the end.
Hairpin needle?
What did I say? Hair needle pin?
The hair needle pin.
The hair needle pin. Yes. So they were going into that corner. Oscar was able to pass. No, Lando was able to pass Oscar for a brief second. Oscar took back his fourth place position. Then they were going into the starting straight. Oscar was ahead of Lando. Lando was behind him towards like the left side. And it seemed like he was hoping for Oscar to make some space.
Well, not maybe making some space, but maybe moving to the right because the inside line is the preferred line.
Correct.
And then maybe also making a defensive move.
Yes.
However, he didn't. So Lando ended up actually driving into the back of Oscar Piastri. Oscar Piastri being the luckiest motherfucker there is.
Seriously.
Not picking up seemingly any damage or not even a puncture. Unfortunately, that ended up being the end of Lando's race.
Yeah, because the wall was right next to him, so he collided into the wall, which wrecked his
front,
the front left and just the left side of his car. He was immediately on the radio and he was like, I'm so sorry, I'm stupid, it was my fault.
Yeah.
Because there was really nothing Oscar could have done because he was literally in front of Lando, and he was not like brake checking him or anything like that. It was just he was there. I think
it's also like he's obviously drafting, so he was probably faster than maybe expected, and then once again he thought something would open up, and he didn't blame Oscar at all, which I think is fair. I will say it's also so unfortunate because I saw because I was like posting on Blue Sky, I saw like other people, and then people are like also saying like, yeah, I hope that Lando will crash out, and then also Russell and Max will take each other out, and Oscar will win. And I'm like,
No.
like once again, I'm not really a Lando supporter,
Mm-hmm.
but that doesn't mean that I want him to crash out or
No.
that I want him to like have like any like bad situations.
Yeah.
Like I want them to battle it out on track.
Oh,
I don't
100%.
I don't want anything like that to happen. So I can't imagine the amount of hate and that's gonna flood online against Lando again, because people are so, like we talked about this, like last year he was beloved, right? And then this year it's like the
pendulum swings so extreme
in the other way, and it is so terrible because this is let this guy do his fucking job, you know? And it's, of course he didn't want this to happen, you know? And this is a mistake that could have happened to anyone. And this is unfortunately stuff that happens when you race at the limit.
Yeah, it's such a bummer because it happened with just a couple laps to go. It happened in lap 66 out of 70. So then the race unfortunately ended in the safety car because, there was, they had to take the car off the track, and it was just...
Which was obviously also then kind of maybe nice for Kimi. He was able to like breathe easy. There was 3 more things I wanted to bring up real quick.
Oh, okay.
Really huge bummer for Alexander Albon as well as Liam Lawson for having to retire their car.
True.
Alex, big back-to-back retirements because the car is not... wasn't functioning properly, so I think it just shut off. And unfortunately, I feel like they've been lucky in a way that it always happens in a corner where they're able to just kind of drive off and park it perfectly.
Because it was a quick yellow flag.
It was into the hairpin. He was able...
Hair needle pin?
Yeah. He was able... The car just shut off, so he was able to just like... There's this huge runoff area.
Yes.
He was able to just like park it to the side. And very unfortunate because Albon was driving. Would have maybe potentially been able to make it into the points because he did. He started in the points.
Well, no, because they messed up his strategy.
Oh, yeah. He was really fucking pissed.
He was really annoyed over the radio because he was saying like, I'm so annoyed that you guys are not listening to me.
Yeah, he literally said that.
Yeah, he did. And it sucks if your driver is so frustrated with you that he also feels like he needs to voice it over the radio.
It's like, listen, I'm telling you this. Yeah. Right? And then this also means then now no points for Williams this weekend, which is, of course, 1 point.
Carlos got 1 point.
Carlos did make it up to the 10th place. And then Liam Lawson also had to retire the car because they're like, we need to protect the
power unit.
Which is interesting because they already put in a new power unit. So I guess there must be issues again with it. Very frustrating.
And I'm wondering if they're maybe running out of power units.
Well, you get... Yes, or maybe they're also maybe running more an experimental setup with him because they're like, well, you started from pits anyway, so let's try something here. Yeah. And then, okay, let's protect the unit. Very unfortunate. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up, which happened actually in one of the free practices, which is the most annoying thing and really unnecessary, that Yuki ended up getting a 10-place grid penalty.
Yes.
For overtaking in a red flag.
Yes.
So he ended up overtaking the car that was actually damaged, but it was driving back to the pit. So the car was still on track, but he was, I guess, under the impression, well, this is damaged the car. Yeah. So I'm just going to overtake. Here's the thing. 2 thoughts that I have. First of all, super fucking avoidable. Yeah. Like a 10-place grid penalty, like this... Unless you qualify in P1, you're always going to have a shitty, starting position. 100%. You're always going to essentially start outside of the points, even in P1 technically, right? And what were the chances that he was going to make it, all the way? No offense, but it just like he has not been qualifying in that way. Yeah. And then also, I genuinely believe like he was under the impression that he thought he could make that pass because the car is, but I'm like, in my opinion, if you're a driver, you should be aware of the rules of the job that you have to whether or not this is the right thing to do. Because in the end, you overtook someone when there was no point. Yeah. Right? And I get that you were like, well, it doesn't matter, right? But you essentially broke the rules and you get a 10 grid penalty for something that's so avoidable. You're not racing against anyone. You're not gaining anything by overtaking.
Urgency, really.
Exactly. So it's like, dude, this is avoidable. Yeah.
Or if you're uncertain, just ask. Just radio your team and be like, hey, am I good to overtake so and so because they're technically out of the race or whatever.
Exactly.
You know?
But in this case, once again, the race was, or the practice was red flagged anyways.
Yeah.
So what's the fucking point, dude?
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing, man? You're not, qualifying. You're not doing anything. So very, very unfortunate.
Yeah.
Then, yeah. So the race finished with Russell taking it through the pits behind the safety car. Max Verstappen coming in second and Kimi Antonelli in third. And then